Hello and welcome to the Fit News Podcast. I am your host, Jen Shaver. And before I introduce today's very special guest, I want to remind you, ladies, to head on over and grab your free protein cheat sheet today if you haven't already. Remember that it features 30 foods with 30 grams of protein or more designed to curb those afternoon cravings that often sabotage your weight loss goals. And these options will help you stay fuller longer so you avoid getting hangry and eating everything in the pantry when you get home from work. Head on over to workwithjenshaver.com to grab it today or check the show notes for the link. Now, joining me today is the host of the Fresh and Fired Up podcast, Dr. Emily Marshall. She is a former world-level gymnast, a chiropractor, and a mom of 4 on a mission to inspire women of excellence across generations. She is the founder and CEO of Frexy, a fashion company that specializes in luxury jackets designed for fit women. Dr. Emily, thank you so much for joining us today on the Fit News Podcast.
Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to be here, Jen.
Yeah, I'm excited to chat. I know as the host of the Fresh and Fired Up podcast, you have your own podcast. What kind of inspired you to start your podcast, and how you hope to impact and inspire women, of excellence with different generations, throughout your episodes?
When I started the Fresh and Fired Up podcast, it was because I started doing speaking events, actually local speaking events at women in business type networking events. I got hired for, I got hired for a few. And it was so interesting because it was my husband actually who found the advertisement, like they're looking for keynote speakers for these different events. And I just was like, okay. He's like, yeah, you should apply. I'm like, well, I guess so.
What am I going to talk about?
Yeah, exactly. So I applied and I ended up getting, I did 5, that first year that I did it, I did 5 different keynotes. And then I started thinking, oh, I could do this other places. And it was really fun and was able to inspire women and had good feedback from it. But when I first started putting my name out there to do speaking events, you get these questions like, well, what's your website? I'm like, oh yeah, I guess I should have a website. Do you have like content we could listen to see, to kind of test, like, do we want this person speaking? Like, do you have a podcast? I'm like, maybe I should have a podcast. I don't know, like, so it was all very like, I don't know, it unfolded organically. And I cannot speak about these things without giving shout outs to my husband, because every single step along the way, he is my biggest cheerleader. He's like, yeah, no, you can do it. Here, I ordered a mic for you. I'm like, I don't know if I want to do this. He's like, I already ordered a mic for you. I already ordered these lights that we're going to do for the video. And I'm just like, okay, I guess we're doing this. So it's
oh, that's great.
But yeah, exactly what you said in the bio, right? Inspiring excellence among women, and that can be through fitness and health. It can be through actually following through with the goals that you set for yourself and the example that you set for your children, if you have them, or if you're a coach or a teacher, or just, other people in the community. We're all setting an example for someone else. And if you're a business owner, you're setting that example for your employees.
Right.
And I just feel very convicted that we need to take ownership over our actions. And that's the best way for us to lead in our lives. And we're all leading in some capacity. And often it just starts with learning how to lead ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so those are some of the thoughts behind where the Fresh and Fired Up podcast came. However, the name of the Fresh and Fired Up podcast was directly inspired by a quote by Saint Catherine of Siena, which is, be who God meant you to be, and you will set the world on fire. That's why it's fired up. And the word fresh kind of is like, it's just that infusing energy into people.
Yeah.
So many people like are just struggling in their lives. It's like a trudging around. I think we might have talked about this when we spoke, when you were on my podcast, right?
Yeah.
It's like, just breathing life into people, I think, can be really helpful.
Right. And so when you were doing those talks, what were your topics that you were discussing in the first 5 keynotes? What were?
Oh, it was, so the first 5, it was actually 1 keynote, different events.
Okay.
So the keynote that I did was called Courageous Connection. And I love this topic because I feel like, well, we need connection. We
Mhm.
all need connection. And
Right.
so often people shy away from connection because
Mhm.
of fear. And they're afraid of the judgment of others, is often what
Mhm.
happens with it. Or they have some sort of insecurity within themselves that's kind of holding them back, because you'll find that most of the time people want to connect, even if
Mhm.
they're, whether they're more extroverted or more introverted. Even, extroverts, it's more obvious that they want to connect. But
Yeah.
I do believe that if you are more introverted, you still want to connect in your own way, but often it can be a really scary, anxiety provoking thing.
Mhm.
And so within my keynotes, I went through kind of the basics, the A, B, C's, and there's a D too, A, B, C, D, which is you can help yourself to cultivate more courage to make those connections just through your appearance. So the A is for appearance. It's like people are going to judge how you appear within the first 7 seconds of seeing you. There's going to be at least 11 or more different things that automatically go through their brain that is
Mhm.
on the subconscious level. You can have an effect on that just by what you wear,
Mhm.
whether your hair is done, whether you have makeup on. And I'm not saying if you're a person who doesn't like wearing makeup, you don't have to. But
Yeah.
my point with it is you need to appear the way that you feel confident in yourself.
Right.
And so I know if I leave the gym and my hair is a mess and I don't have any makeup on and I'm kind of looking haggard, if I go into the grocery store, I feel like I don't really want to talk to anyone. I just want to get in and get out
You
because
put your hat and your sunglasses on and you go.
yeah, that was like one good thing for COVID. You could you have your mask and then your glasses in your hat and you're like, nobody can see me. Right. But it's one of those things that I'm way less likely to be cheery and chatty with the cashier, even when I
Right.
just like, I don't feel confident in my
Mhm.
own appearance. Why? Because partly I'm judging myself and then I'm assuming other people are judging me. And
Yeah.
maybe not everyone is, but if it's in your head, it's going to affect the way you connect with that person.
Right.
So that would be the A. And then the B is for behavior. That affects your behavior and your body language.
Mhm.
And it's, 50, I believe it's 58% of, or no, 55% of our communication comes through body language,
Wow.
38% through tone of voice, and only 7% through the words we use. So
Wow.
that body language is so key for making connections with
Uh-huh.
people. It's like, did you make eye contact? It's really basic things. Did you
Right.
smile? Is your body language open? Are you tuned towards or away from the person? You want to be heart to heart with them. You don't want to have barriers between, because that creates mistrust, right? If your arms are crossed or you're holding your purse
Yeah.
in front of your chest, you're like creating a barrier between you and that person. Extending a handshake if that's appropriate in that setting. So all of those cues affect your
Mhm.
ability to connect. So that was the B. And then the C is what was the C? Now I'm forgetting. It's your communication.
Oh.
It's your communication. So how now that gets you to the part of actually the spoken words, right? Are you asking questions? Do you acknowledge what the person says? Do
Mhm.
you talk over top of the person? Right? So there's little key communication cues that
Mhm.
can affect how we connect with people. And then the D, I didn't really focus on that talk, but it's the digital footprint. People will look up. They will look up and see, what do you have online? So even when you're thinking
Yeah.
about making connections, whether it's for networking as a entrepreneur or business owner, if you are in an employee position and you are looking to get hired somewhere,
Mhm.
your digital footprint makes a huge difference, because does where they're looking up, oh, do I want to hire this person? If you just have all pictures of you getting high and drunk on the
Mm.
weekends, do they
Partying it
want to
away.
hire
Right.
you?
Right.
That's going to actually affect it, right? So you
Right.
can actually have more. I don't really love the word control, because I think people try to control things too much.
Yeah.
So it's like you can be in more command of how
Ah.
you connect with people and their perception of you
Mhm.
just by doing these things: how you dress, how you behave with your body language,
Right.
how you communicate with the words you choose, and what your digital footprint is.
Mhm. Mhm. And like you said, it kind of puts you in the driver's seat
Yes.
when it comes to, connecting with others. And that for an introvert is a big thing, because then they feel like, there is some quote
Level
unquote
of control, right? People
right.
kind of
Right,
want
because
that.
right, especially I think as an introvert, then they feel more in command, as you said, you
Yes.
know. Yeah. But there is a big connection And there are more and more studies coming out between the social connection and mental health, and the importance, I should say, of the social connection and mental health.
It's huge.
Yeah.
And we live in an era that the rates of loneliness has skyrocketed.
Right.
And people are more technologically, people are more connected than ever.
Mm-hmm.
They have the opportunity to connect with more people worldwide,
Right.
but they are losing their connection in person.
Mm-hmm.
The number of young people nowadays that it is very intimidating for them to answer phone calls.
Right.
Yes, there's a high level of comfort with text messaging and with DMs and social media interactions.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we still need to lead by example for anyone who's younger. I mean, I guess age doesn't always play a role. Anyone
Right.
who you might be in a mentorship position with,
Mm-hmm.
in how to interact with an actual phone call while you're speaking to someone. Because I think about that from our clinic, right? People,
Yeah.
we hire them, they're answering the phones and, having people schedule their appointments. And it always amazes me, just like the basics of, when
Yeah.
you smile and you answer the phone versus when you're not smiling.
Right.
If you're enunciating your words and how that comes through as either uncertain or confident to the
Mm-hmm.
person that is on the other end of the phone. And then take that now and do it with your in-person interactions.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's going to affect your connections, which when you feel more connected with people physically in your environment, that is going to help you to feel less lonely.
Mm-hmm.
And that affects your mental health.
Yep. Yeah. Well, and I think it goes back to, you were giving the statistics before, and I think you said, was it 7 to 8% with text, the communication.
Oh yeah, the spoken word. Yeah, only
Yeah.
like 7% of what you're trying what you're trying to say is actually coming through
Right.
in those written words. People
Yeah.
are adding their own influxes to it. That's why I
interpretation, right? So a text,
Yes.
the way that you interpret a text that comes through, that somebody writes, there's a lot open for interpretation. You might be, oh, this person's angry when they're really not angry at all.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I know I heard when I was working, this was a few years ago now, but when I was working in our clinic and the teenager in the interaction was the one getting the appointment and the mom was there with her and they're kind of bantering back and forth as I'm treating this patient. And they were having this conversation about text messaging and the teenager was like, no, mom, I know you want to use proper punctuation, but when you put a period at the end of the text, it makes it seem angry. But if you just leave it open or you put an exclamation mark, then the person's like, oh no, this is a happy text. So only use a period if you're like, this is kind of has like an angry influx or like
a period can
very
be so aggressive, right?
And I was like, really? That's so funny. I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
apparently this matters. So, depending on what generation you're into, it will actually come through differently, which is kind of hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like when you're doing that, there's two types of people, right? There's the people who send text messages and then there's the people who send voice memos. I'm a voice memo person where I'll just record it and then you have to listen to it, even if it's, 10 seconds long. My older sister and I have this joke because she cannot send me a voice memo that's under a minute and it cuts her off. So then I get like a minute and then another minute and then another minute. And then I purposely try to reply to her in like 20 seconds or less. And she's like, I don't know how you do it. I'm like, you just use so many words.
I'm just good at summarizing. That's all.
But yeah, so it's kind of funny. If you do voice memos, that helps a lot actually, because then there's not that interpretation.
Right.
Not everyone wants to do that. It's so funny because the people who like just straight word text get annoyed by the people who voice memo, and the people who voice memo get annoyed by the people who just straight word text. And you always marry the opposite.
So many ways. Yeah. So many ways to communicate now, right? But still the best is, through words and face to face or on the phone.
Yeah. If you're able to.
Yeah.
I think it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Because there's been benefits within our society of having all of these things, right? Having AI to type everything for you, right? It speeds everything up. But I really do think people appreciate a personal touch.
Yeah. Yeah,
It
for
goes a long
sure.
way.
Certainly does. Now, as a former world level gymnast, what are some key lessons from gymnastics that have helped you in your entrepreneurial journey and your personal life?
Yeah, it's so fun to think back to those days. I just actually recorded a podcast on my podcast, the one that came out this week,
Yeah.
that it's titled Pause and See Your Progress, because I found this little book in our we were cleaning out our garage, and I found this little book in our garage this past weekend, and I was like, "No way, I haven't looked at this in so long." It was from when I was like, I think I got it when I was like 15, but I have all these notes written in there
Oh, wow.
from when I was competing.
Yeah.
And because the little book has a bunch of quotes and Bible verses and it just inspiring things in this book,
Yeah.
okay? And then I have these little notes written like, "Oh, I really enjoyed this quote. It inspired me in this competition," and then like what I learned from it, and how, this competition didn't go as well as I thought it would, but here's what did go well. And I was looking back and I was like, "Wow, that's so funny." And this is what's crazy. This little book, the very first page, I had a sticky note in it and it says, "Get fired up." And on my podcast, I always say, "Let's get fired up." And I'm like, "Oh my goodness, I had no idea when I was like 15 years old that I would then in my 30s have a podcast called Fresh and Fired Up." Isn't that so cool?
That's crazy.
I know, right? So,
Wow.
yes, the lessons I learned is not to limit yourself in your
Hmm.
mind.
Hmm.
And also to not let other people put limitations on you, because often that's their own limit.
Right.
And when I think back, I remember being a little girl and wanting so badly to compete in the Olympics.
Hmm.
My sisters and I used to love watching gymnastics and figure skating, actually.
Oh,
But I just happened to be, yeah, we just loved watching them in the Olympics. And it was a dream that I had in my heart from a young age.
yeah.
And when I started doing gymnastics and I hit my teenage years and it seemed promising, like, oh, I could actually, well, for a while, I wasn't doing as well as I hoped. And I was like, I don't know if I'm going to get anywhere with this when I was from age 10 to yeah, probably age 10 to 14. I was like, "Oh, I'm doing okay at
Hmm.
competitions." And that's when I was doing artistic gymnastics. Then I switched because there's several different disciplines of gymnastics that you can do.
Hmm.
I switched to aerobic gymnastics, which is just if you don't know what it is, just look it up. It's fun. And it's done on the floor
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah.
And so I switched to aerobic gymnastics, and when I did my first qualifier for nationals, I got a bronze medal. And it was the first time I was on the podium at a higher level. And
Yeah.
if you made the podium at so many competitions within the year, you'd make nationals. And I just that one competition of getting on the podium opened my mind to the possibility of like, wait a sec, I've never actually really thought maybe like fully invested myself in like,
Yeah.
I could do this. And I was like, okay, there's a chance. So as soon as I knew there's a chance,
Yeah.
I started working harder. And then I ended up qualifying for nationals. And I mean, that just changed
Yeah.
everything. I was like, oh my goodness, this is possible. Here we go. And so I ended up getting two national golds, I think the year or two later. And that was such a cool experience too, because what it did was it allowed me to level up. I'm going to say it.
Yeah.
So I was in a small town and you only know a certain level. And
Uh-huh.
when I won nationals and I got those two golds, it qualified me to do this special gala. So it was like only the gold medalists do this gala. And so now I was put with the gold medalists from all these different disciplines of gymnastics, as well like men and women.
Oh,
And when
wow.
you're on, it was the first time I was on the floor with a male world champion gymnast. Man, they are strong. And this
Yeah.
this is just so powerful. And they're tumbling past me and I'm like, "Oh, wow. They're amazing."
Yeah.
Like there's a whole other level that I haven't even got to yet, right? So
Yeah.
I think there's a lesson in being inspired by people who are more successful than you rather than being jealous of your success. It's
Yep.
this mindset shift between, well, look how amazing they are. They're better than me. I could never do that.
Hmm.
To, oh, wow, how are they doing that? I want to learn.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so
And
that That was
Yeah.
huge for me. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the other interesting part of all of that was you talked about between the ages of 10 and 14, you were doing okay, right? And you were going along, but you really weren't having huge success.
No, I
So I
barely
think
ever
the
made the
fact
podium.
that
Mhm.
you kept pushing and kept going with it, I think that right there is a really big lesson for many people because you didn't just throw your hands up in the air and say, whatever, I'm out of here. I'm not winning
Yeah.
right now, right? Because if you had done that, the success that you had later on would have never come. And I think that translates into many people's health journeys that they have. Wouldn't you say?
It does, definitely. And I will tell you, when I think back to those years of 10 to 14, when I
Mhm.
was getting like 8th place or 6th place, I so many times I'd get 4th and I'd be like, yeah, see, I never make the podium. That's what I would tell myself.
Mhm.
And the excuse that I gave myself was, it's because you're from a small town. It
Mhm.
was the big city girls that were on the podium. So I was
Mhm.
like, well, we don't have the resources. We don't have the whatever excuse I wanted to tell myself, which was
Right.
like not actually valid.
Right.
So that translates too, because if you feel like you're stuck in a rut,
Mhm.
it didn't shift for me until I pivoted. Remember, I actually switched
Right.
disciplines. I pivoted. I
Right.
just tweaked it. And I was like, I found that this is the spot where I can shine and I can run with it.
Mhm.
And not to say it's not quitting. There's a difference between quitting and giving up, and it's more in your mind. Have you
Right.
given up in your mind, or
Mhm.
have you been like, can I shift and adapt? And that is true of our health journeys. That is true of like I always think in business and entrepreneurship as well,
Yeah.
is you cannot stay the same.
Right.
Those who are willing to constantly evolve are the ones who
Mhm.
win.
Yeah.
They never look back and go, because there's kind of two camps, right? You do need to stay with the basics, the fundamentals. You need to be disciplined and consistent.
Yes.
So those things, yes, you need to do over and over and over again. And that's in the weight room for us as athletes. It was like, you need to be in the weight room doing the basic weight lifts because that's going to keep you at a certain level of strength.
You have to do the
You
boring
need
stuff.
Yeah, you need to do your flexibility every single
Yeah.
day. Because I coach little gymnasts now, and most of them, their stuck point is they're not flexible enough
Uh-huh.
because they will do their splits and their bridges and all the things at practice. It's like, no, you need to do them outside of practice. I remember when my husband and I first started dating, and I was, a 19-year-old, we'd be, out doing something all day, and we'd get back, we'd be at his parents' house, and we'd just be done eating dinner, and everyone is sitting down to watch TV, and I would literally be on their living room floor doing splits. I was like the weirdest girlfriend that they're like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm stretching. I haven't done my stretches today. I need to do all these stretches. I never miss a day.
Yeah.
That's how I was at a world level. So
Mhm.
people who weren't at that level are like, what are you doing? You're such a weirdo. If I didn't get a chance to get some level of training or stretching in a day when I was in university, same thing. I would get home to my residence room
Mhm.
at like midnight and I would do it. I would not miss.
Right.
So those are the fundamental things that you need to stick with. But then the bigger picture of it is you do need to be able to be adaptable and pivot
Yeah.
as well. So it's kind of this blend of the two,
Mhm.
and not just quit, like you said, and give
Right.
up in those times when you're like, well, I'm not seeing the progress. We talked about this before you
Yeah.
hit record,
Yeah.
right? Which is,
Yeah.
if you've started on your journey of lifting weights, it's easy to look at someone like me and be like, oh, yeah, you started gymnastics when you were 5 years old. You started in the weight room when you were 12 or 13. Well, of course you can do all the stuff. Of course you can lift heavy weights. No, you can too. It's just, it compounds over time.
Yeah.
So if you decide, oh, I'm going to do, you're thinking about becoming a client with Jen. Let's just paint that picture and go, okay, I'm going to try her program and I'm just going to do it for 30 days. And in 30 days, you're like, well, I'm not really getting the results I hope for. Guess what? You haven't done it long enough.
Right.
Even in 6 months, you are going to start to see progress, but you're not going to be where you want to be. If you've got, a picture on your vision board of someone who's been an athlete or been, bodybuilding for the last 10 years,
Right.
you're going to see a huge difference after a year, even bigger after 2. And it's not really until year 3 of lifting weights that you're like, you're going to look like you've been doing it your whole life probably
Mhm.
by then.
Yeah. Yeah. And the problem is that most people don't give it that much time. They don't give it enough time. And yet the weightlifting is the best return on investment because as you age, you're losing muscle and, your bone strength is also heading out the door. And the only way to protect against that is to lift some weights.
Yes. It's called for bones, it's called Wolff's Law, which is when you put stress on a bone, your body lays down more bone. That's why when someone fractures a bone
Mm-hmm.
and your body's relaying down bone,
Mm-hmm.
people don't fracture their bones in the same spot twice because there was so much stress that went through that area of the bone.
Mm-hmm.
Your body lays down extra bone mineral density in that area.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you don't want to build bone mineral.
Yeah. Well, hold on. We're not suggesting you go out and break all your bones.
Don't go break all your bones. That's not the best way to do it. But if you even think about any pounding exercise, so if you're jumping, like if you're skipping, you're
Mhm.
going to build bone mineral density in your
Mhm.
feet bones.
Mhm.
And if when you're weightlifting and you're actually stressing where the muscle attaches on the bone, you're building bone under that muscle.
Mhm.
And then the same is true of the muscle, the actual muscle fibers. You're going to recruit more muscle fibers. You're going to hypertrophy those muscles, and you are going to combat sarcopenia.
Mhm.
Sarcopenia is age-related wasting of muscle tissue. How do you combat that? Through stressing the muscle, which is lifting heavy weights,
Mhm.
number one. And number two is eating enough protein. So when you advertised your protein cheat sheet,
Yeah.
protein is where it's at. And you
Yeah.
want to have nutrient dense protein.
Yeah.
So I am a big advocate of eating red meat. It gives you
Yes.
all of your essential nutrients. It gives you, it's jam packed full of everything you need and all the protein you need. And not only just like skeletal red meat, but organ meats.
Mhm.
So much good stuff in there.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's not talked about enough. I mean,
Right.
obviously, you can get your protein sources in multiple places and a
Right.
variety,
But it's a
but
complete protein source.
it is. Yep.
Yeah.
And there's been eras of time where it's got a bad media rap, like I don't why whatever,
Yeah.
agendas that
Right.
there's agendas that society pushes that it's like, red meat's bad for you. And it's like, no, it is not bad
Yeah.
for you. So just wanted
Yeah.
to throw that nugget in
Yep.
there too.
Yes. And it's necessary, right? Especially as women. I think we need
It
to.
is.
Yeah.
It's got your iron in there. It's
Mhm.
got so many good things. So yeah, I'm a steak girl through and through. What's your favorite protein, Jen?
Yeah. You know what? That's a great question. And I like a good steak as well.
It was meant to be.
Yep. Yes. I want to switch gears just a little away from the exercise and talk about Frexie for a sec. So let's
Sure.
talk about Frexie.
Thank
First,
you.
tell the listeners all about it. I was so excited. I won a Frexie contest. It's been unusually warm here, so I haven't been able to wear my Frexie jacket yet.
That's not a bad
I'm like,
problem though.
it's a little warm, but it is going to get cold for a few days, so I will put it on. I'm excited. I tried it on, and it is buttery soft. But yeah,
Oh, good.
just tell the listeners, a little bit about Frexie, how it came about, and yeah, all about it.
Well, thank you for asking. I love talking about Frexie. So I'm just trying to think of the year. So 2013, I
Mhm.
became a chiropractor. So that was after, because we just came off of talking about the competing in gymnastics, and that was
Yeah.
all through my university years. And so I started working as a chiropractor in the Toronto area in 2013, and I worked there for 3 years while my husband was still in school, becoming a chiropractor as well, because now we own a clinic together. And at the time when we decided to move to where we live now in Alberta, Canada, my husband wasn't done school yet. So he was finishing his degree. Well, he was actually in his internship. He was finishing for 11 months. And I moved ahead out here because the timing of the way the clinic sale went, the people who were selling were like, we're selling right away. It's like a now or never type of deal. So I worked in our clinic for several years up until, okay, so 2016 to 2020.
Mm.
And we have 4 kids, who's kind of in and out, having babies in between there. And my husband ended up moving out here and we were tag teaming working at the clinic. Well, when COVID hit 2020, it shut, the government shut the clinic down completely for 6 to 8 weeks. And all of our eggs are in that one basket. So we saw our bank accounts go to zero. Thankfully, for a lot of people, they went below, we're dipping into debt through that time, which is really hard. It was hard for people, right? And for us, it kind of made us think, okay, it'd be cool to have something different outside of the clinic alone. And at that time, because I was pregnant during 2020, my husband was like, and there was so much uncertainty about like what's going on with this COVID thing, right?
Yeah.
So my husband was like, "You're staying home. I'm working at the clinic, so I'm not taking any risks, like with you being pregnant, right?" So he was fully doing the clinic, and I was having a baby, so that was fun. But what happened throughout that time is I was investigating other options other than just working at the clinic as well, so that we could have a different option. And so it was kind of a journey to get to Frexy, and I won't get into all of that, but basically that journey of being away from our clinic led me to doing something different, which was Frexy. And Frexy is a company that birthed out of kind of my own love for fashion.
Yeah.
And it was something that I've always liked from a younger age, but never really thought I could do. It was just so different than the path that I was on at the time. But I had a really mind shift about how what we wear affects our, kind of like the talk I was telling you about, how it affects how we connect with people. And it was in the other day I was telling someone 2018, but it was actually in 2019. 2019 was when I really started to discover my own style as a professional, because you come through years of being a student. I mean, I was a student for 8 years post-secondary. You'd be in the library, like in sweatpants studying, right? And then all of a sudden you're in a professional environment and you're trying to figure out, well, what's my style?
Yeah.
And I didn't really have one. Like I grew up with a lot of hand-me-downs. And so just whatever, and they were fine. They were nice hand-me-downs, but not something I specifically picked as a cohesive style for myself that I love.
Yeah.
And so I was still in that phase as a new doc, as well as through the phases of body changes, being pregnant.
Yeah, with pregnancy.
Yes.
And that changes your body, and you're going in and out, and
And all along being an athlete with broad shoulders. I'd buy these at the time, honestly, right out of school, like cheaper blazers that were just crappy material and so tight across my shoulders. By the end of a workday, I would get like here I am taking care of people with their aches and pains with their necks and backs.
And
by the end of my day, my traps are tight, my neck is sore, and I'm getting a headache. And I'm like, get these dress clothes off me. Same with dress shoes, right?
Yeah.
I'd much rather be in bare feet. But anyways, a lot of the professional apparel is not designed for our bodies. And I've always been obsessed with the way that our bodies move as a gymnast and then as a chiropractor. And who knew that your clothes could also be restricting those proper body movements, affecting your brain health, your body health, and your productivity. And so I was like, I want to design a company that is professional wear for women that allows your body to move properly.
Yeah.
And that kind of ties back into the chiropractic thing in a way, right?
Yep.
And so that was how the idea birthed.
Mm-hmm.
And so Frexy jackets, that's why the hashtag for Frexy is made to move, because you were made to move, and Frexy is made to move with you. So all of our jackets are designed for broad-shouldered athletic frame women, so that you can feel like you can wear a jacket. And I am also working on blazer development right now, that you can wear those clothes and by the end of your day not feel tight and sore and restricted. If you want to put your hair up, you'll actually be able to reach and put it up without taking your jacket off. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
And so that's our niche. That's what we do. And so far it's been a process because it's a startup. So I will say, within the last year, we made no money. We spent more money than we made on the company, but that's common for most startups. And just starting to see more steady sales.
Yeah.
And the part that I love the most is everyone who's bought a Frexy jacket so far has loved it or
Yeah.
has given some sort of good feedback. So that
Yeah.
makes my heart so happy
Yeah.
because it's been a long process through actually developing the designs, working with designers, sourcing fabrics, building out the brand. There's a ton of components, but it's
Right.
been a really fun learning curve. So thank you for
Yeah.
asking about
Yeah.
it.
But again, it goes back to it's the same thing as what was happening, right? Between the ages of 10 and 14.
Yeah.
And you've hit bumps in the road, but you didn't say, forget it, we're not going to continue making this. We're going to keep
Yes.
going and we're going to find, what works, what doesn't work, and how to do it best and keep
Yeah.
going. And I think that's the important lesson that, people need to understand and people need to learn that there will be bumps and, it's like that little cartoon that you've seen, success isn't linear, right? Where with the arrow going up, it's actually the arrow goes up and then it does this loop-de-loo and then it finally kind of makes its way up. And, I think that's an important lesson.
It is. And so much of it can help when you know the vision, right? And I think that can be hard. It took me a while to shift from I knew my vision really well as a chiropractor. Our vision at our clinic is to nurture generations. And there's always been this theme of like, helping people throughout generations connect with each other and help each other. And so it took me a little while to clarify what that was for Frexy, but that's the vision for Frexy. It is to inspire women of excellence throughout generations. And we do that by keeping our bodies strong and healthy. Clothes should be designed for strong, healthy women because that should be the norm. We should be
Right.
able to move our bodies as we work, things that help us be more productive because this is about living a life of excellence. And it comes from the Proverbs 31 woman. If you read Proverbs 31 in the Bible, it talks about this woman who's just this hardworking woman and she's a saleswoman and she makes garments and she sells them and she works hard for her family. If you've never read it, go read it. It's so good. And it talks about being clothed in strength and dignity. And so how do we create women of excellence? Well, our mission, like the heart behind Frexy, the mission is to clothe millions of women with strength and dignity. And so I just think about that clothes being designed for strong women that help them feel confident in their careers where they should have earned a certain level of respect. You shouldn't have to feel like you're a woman who only gets to where they are in their career because you had to whatever, like promote or sell your body or whatever the stereotypes may be, maybe not, but just empowering women to own it, own confidently their body, their strength, what they bring to the table as a leader, as a business owner, or, whatever career you're trying to develop in. And that's the heart behind Frexy. So I hope that comes through to people.
Yeah, I love it. Now, Dr. Emily, if our listeners want to know more about you or more about Frexy, where can they find you?
I'm most active on Instagram at Dr. Emily Marshall, Dr. Emily Marshall. But I do have dremilymarshall.com. You can go there if you do want to hire me as a speaker or, just be able to see the podcast episodes, which are fresh and fired up. You can find on Apple or Spotify.
Okay.
And then for Frexy, the handle is at FrexyFit. So FREXYFIT. And it's frexyfit.com. Those are the main two spots you can find us on. I just started Frexy on Facebook and YouTube and TikTok. I think there's like one post. So you'll be like, oh, they look like tiny accounts, but it's all new. The company's only existed since December of 2023. And we're just on the rise. Watch out. Here we come.
Love it. Well, thank you for joining us today. We appreciate your time and all that you had to share.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I hope that it's been valuable and that, I'm able to connect with some of your listeners and I've loved getting to know you. It's been so fun. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you for listening to the Fit News podcast and we will catch you next time.